Close your eyes for a moment and imagine an Earth with no people, no cities, not even grass beneath your feet. Only vast empty lands and silent seas stretching under skies filled with ash and storms. This is where our story begins, long before dinosaurs ruled, when life was still learning how to shape itself into something new. The planet was restless, its bones moving beneath the surface, continents drifting like pieces of a giant puzzle not yet solved. In this quiet but chaotic world, creatures crept from the water, carrying with them the first fragile breaths of air. They were not yet giants, not yet the thunderous rulers of the earth we picture today, but they carried within them the spark of something extraordinary. It was a spark that would, over millions of years, grow into the most magnificent rise and the most haunting fall of a kingdom unlike any other. Tonight, we will wander through their story, step by step, with gentle curiosity, feeling the earth change beneath them, watching life reach for the sky, and listening to the echoes of beings that once shook the ground with every step. This is the rise and fall of dinosaurs, the quiet earth before dinosaurs appeared. At the start, Earth was a land of extremes. Volcanoes painted the horizon with fire, while endless deserts stretched in silence. There were forests, yes, but not the kind we know. Towering ferns and primitive trees stood like strange guardians, their roots tangled in swampy soil. If you listened, you would hear almost nothing but the distant hiss of wind and the bubbling of mud. The air was heavy with gases, thicker and warmer than today. Strange storms rolled in, not with gentle rain, but with lightning that split the skies like the anger of gods. This was a place where survival meant adaptation every single day. Nothing was yet certain, not even the shape of life itself. Beneath this restless sky, small creatures scurried unnoticed. Insects hummed with metallic wings, while amphibians crawled through moss and mud. Their bodies were simple, but their presence meant something bigger was on the horizon. It was as if Earth was setting the stage, waiting for new players to arrive. And in that quiet, something was stirring deep in the cracks of time. Tiny changes, invisible to the eye, were shaping the blueprint of the future. Evolution never announces itself. It whispers quietly, and only the patient can hear. The earth was lonely, but not for long. What was coming would fill the silence with footsteps so heavy their echoes would never truly leave us. Strange life crawling across shallow seas. Life had already claimed the oceans long before dinosaurs were even a thought. Shallow seas stretched across continents, warm and alive with movement. Creatures here were unlike anything we see today. Armored fish with jaws like traps, trilobites crawling over coral beds, and soft-bodied animals drifting like ghosts in the current. The seas were shallow, but they were cradles of innovation. Every creature seemed to be trying out a different design. Fins shaped into armor, jaws into spears, and bodies stretching, folding, and changing. Some would disappear quickly, while others left behind sparks of possibility that would echo into the age of dinosaurs. If you could walk those shores, you'd see strange footprints pressed into wet sand, half belonging to water dwellers, half testing the unknown land. They were the first daring steps of creatures asking a question. Could life exist outside the sea? It wasn't easy. The air was harsh, the land dry and unforgiving. But every failed step was also progress, every breath of air a practice for something greater. These fragile attempts marked the true beginning of a new chapter in life's story. In these shallow seas, history was being written not in words, but in shells, bones, and silent experiments of survival. Early amphibians walking into forests. From the shallows, brave amphibians emerged. Their bodies were awkward, their skin damp, and their lungs not yet built for freedom, but they carried the courage of pioneers. Each step into the fern-filled forests was uncertain, yet filled with promise. The forests they entered were otherworldly. Towering plants rose without flowers, only spores drifting like fine dust in the air. The ground was spongy, a mixture of mud and roots. Imagine the silence broken by the wet slap of amphibian feet, dragging their heavy bodies forward in search of food or shelter. These creatures lived double lives, part in water, part on land. Their eggs still needed to stay close to ponds and swamps, but their hunger pulled them further inland. It was in these clumsy movements that a great transformation was slowly taking place. Bones were strengthening, muscles thickening, lungs practicing for independence. Every movement mattered. Every stumble shaped evolution's lesson book. With each generation they learned to stay longer on land, to explore deeper into the forests, and to rely less on the water that once defined them. They were not yet rulers, but they were bridge builders. Without them, there would be no reptiles, no dinosaurs, and no story for us to tell tonight. Reptiles breaking free from water. The leap from amphibian to reptile was not loud or sudden. It was quiet, almost invisible. But it was one of the most important changes in the history of life. Reptiles did not need to return to water to lay eggs. They carried within their shells a tiny world, safe and self-contained. This small advantage changed everything. Suddenly life was free to move further inland, away from swamps, into drier lands that amphibians could not survive. Reptiles became explorers of deserts, plains, and forests. They could thrive where others struggled, and the earth seemed to open itself to them. Their bodies became tougher, their skin armored against dryness. Their lungs grew stronger, their legs sturdier. They walked with more confidence, leaving tracks that stretched further and further from rivers. It was as if the planet had unlocked a new chapter, one where mobility meant dominance. Predators and prey both took new forms. Some reptiles shrank to blend into the undergrowth. Others grew teeth sharp enough to pierce through the thickest hide. Survival became an arms race, and reptiles were leading the charge with every new adaptation. With each generation, they broke free more completely from the old ties to water. They were now true children of the land, and the stage was set for what would come after, a world of volcanic skies and shifting lands. The earth itself was never still during these ages. Continents drifted like rafts, colliding and breaking apart, raising mountains and deepening seas. Volcanoes belched fire into the air, painting the skies with ash that lingered for years. To live in this time was to exist on a restless planet, one that seemed alive in its own right. The air would shift from warm and moist to cold and dry. Deserts expanded, forests shrank, then returned again with rains. Life had to bend and twist with each new challenge, and those who could not adapt vanished into the fossil record. Imagine standing on a plain where the horizon burned with distant eruptions, while the ground beneath your feet trembled. To early reptiles, this was normal. The planet itself was a predator, and survival meant learning to endure its moods. Yet from this chaos, opportunity emerged. Shifting lands created new habitats. Volcanoes spread minerals that nourished forests. Every catastrophe opened doors for those bold enough to step through. Evolution thrives not in peace, but in turmoil. And so in these fiery skies and restless lands, the blueprint of the dinosaurs was slowly being drawn, waiting for its moment to arrive. The first tiny ancestors of dinosaurs. At first, they were nothing like the giants we imagine. The earliest ancestors of dinosaurs were small, quick, and almost forgettable among the creatures of their age. Some were no bigger than a chicken, darting between shadows of ferns and rocky ground. Yet in their light bones and nimble legs, a spark of the future was hidden. They were survivors, not rulers. Larger reptiles dominated the land, and predators far stronger hunted the plains. These tiny creatures had to rely on speed, agility, and the clever use of their environment. They were not powerful, but they were persistent, and persistence in nature often wins more battles than strength. Their bones tell us stories. Hollow yet sturdy, they allowed for swift movement. Their hips shifted slightly forward, giving them a stride that carried them farther than their rivals. It was not obvious then, but this posture would shape an entire dynasty that stretched for millions of years. When you imagine them, think less of monsters and more of fragile runners weaving between plants, snapping up insects and staying just far enough from danger. It was in their smallness that their greatness was being born, silently and unnoticed. The giants of tomorrow often begin as the whispers of today. How eggs gave reptiles a secret advantage. One of the quiet revolutions of life was hidden inside a shell. Reptilian eggs were not like the fragile, jelly-like clusters of amphibians. They were sealed, self-sufficient chambers, tiny worlds that carried life safely across dry ground. With this, reptiles no longer needed ponds or swamps to raise their young. They could walk further, settle in harsher lands, and thrive where others could not. This gift of mobility reshaped the map of survival. Eggs could be hidden in sand, tucked beneath leaves, or buried in warm earth. Each nest was a fortress, each hatchling born with a head start. While amphibians remained tied to water, reptiles marched boldly into deserts and plains. Imagine the difference it made. A mother laying eggs on high ground, safe from floods while her young emerged ready to walk the land. It was an evolutionary leap that gave reptiles freedom to colonize every kind of environment. Eggs carried possibility. Some grew into herbivores with broad teeth for chewing plants, others into hunters with claws and sharp jaws. The variety of life we see in the fossil record blooms from this one simple adaptation. In the stillness of a shell, the future was waiting quietly. And within those fragile shells, the dynasty of dinosaurs was already preparing to take its first breath, lizard-like forms learning to stand taller. Most reptiles of the early days sprawled low to the ground, their legs jutting sideways like lizards today. But among them, a few began to rise. Their hips shifted, their legs tucked beneath their bodies, and suddenly they could run with longer strides. This change, so small at first, was the foundation of dinosaurs. Standing taller meant speed. It meant endurance. It meant the ability to chase prey longer, to escape predators faster, and to cover distances amphibians and older reptiles never could. The world was opening wide, and these new walkers were the first to claim it. Their skeletons reveal a story of quiet transformation. Stronger hips, longer femurs, and lighter bones gave them a grace others lacked. Even when small, they carried themselves with a posture that whispered of future giants. It wasn't majesty yet, it was practice, rehearsal for the roles evolution had in mind. Picture them, lean, upright, scanning the horizon with sharper eyes. They were no longer bound to shuffle in the dust. They could chase the sun across open ground, each step carrying them further from the shadows of their ancestors. The earth rewards those who rise when others crawl. And these early reptiles had begun to rise, the Triassic dawn of experimentation. The Triassic period was a strange theater of possibilities. Life was experimenting wildly, testing forms that seemed half this, half that. Some reptiles looked like crocodiles with long limbs, others had bodies like lizards, but heads shaped oddly, with frills or horn-like ridges. It was an age of prototypes, where nature seemed to be sketching ideas in rough draft The Earth itself encouraged this experimentation. The supercontinent Pangaea stretched wide, offering endless landscapes. Deserts, forests, and coasts each became laboratories where life could adapt differently. Survival didn't belong to just one body type, it belonged to whichever design could endure the shifting climate. Fossils from this era show variety beyond imagination. Some creatures were herbivores, chewing plants with simple jaws. Others were predators, sprinting on two legs or crawling low like armored tanks. It was a world where nothing felt fixed, everything felt in motion. And in the middle of this diversity, the first dinosaurs appeared, not as rulers, but as competitors in a crowded field. They had no guarantee of dominance yet. They were simply one of many experiments walking under volcanic skies. The future of the Earth often hides in experiments no one notices. In the Triassic, dinosaurs were just that, an unnoticed possibility, creatures with mixed features roaming freely. One of the fascinating parts of the early story is how blended many creatures seemed. Some had the teeth of predators but the bodies of herbivores. Others carried armor on their backs, yet stood upright like hunters. These transitional forms confuse us today, but they remind us that evolution is not clean. It is messy, creative, and endlessly inventive. Imagine walking through a Triassic plain and seeing a creature with the long tail of a lizard, the upright stance of a bird, and the teeth of a carnivore. Would you know what to call it? Neither did the Earth. Names only come later. In their time, they were simply survivors. These in-between forms were essential. They carried forward traits that would later define true dinosaurs: strong hips, long legs, sharper senses. But they also carried traits that would vanish forever, leaving only faint traces in the fossil record. They were like bridges, temporary and fragile, but necessary to cross. The beauty of these creatures lies in their uncertainty. They were not finished works, but drafts, each generation testing a new line of possibility. Some led nowhere, others led to the magnificent forms we remember today. And as these mixed-featured beings roamed, the first unmistakable dinosaurs were quietly stepping into the world, preparing to change the rhythm of Earth's heartbeat. The first true dinosaurs taking shape. The first dinosaurs were not towering beasts. They were lean, almost fragile creatures that darted across the Triassic ground on two legs. Their hips had shifted into a new design, giving them balance and speed unlike any other reptile. They were still small, but their form was distinct, the blueprint of the dynasty to come. They had long tails for counterbalance, slender necks and jaws lined with sharp teeth. Some hunted insects and small prey, while others nibbled on plants. They were adaptable, able to carve out niches that other reptiles left untouched. Adaptability, more than size, is what allowed them to rise. If you looked closely, you'd see traits that felt different from the rest of the reptilian world. Their bones were light, their posture upright, and their strides efficient. They weren't just surviving. They were practicing for greatness, testing the moves that would one day shake continents. At first, no one would have guessed they'd dominate the Earth. They were not yet kings, only clever challengers in a crowded arena. But history often belongs to the unnoticed at first, the ones who adapt silently until the time is right. And so, in these small-bodied hunters and grazers, the future of an age was quietly taking its first breath. Light-boned hunters sprinting after insects. Among the earliest dinosaurs, some were built for speed rather than strength. Their bones were hollow but strong, their limbs long and slender. They moved like shadows, quick and precise, darting after insects and small lizards. They did not need brute force. Agility was their weapon. Picture a warm Triassic evening, the ground buzzing with dragonflies and beetles. A light-boned hunter waits in the ferns, then bursts forward with sudden grace, jaws snapping. These creatures were not giants, but in their elegance lay the seeds of a new way of life. Speed itself was survival. The advantage of lightness was profound. While heavy reptiles lumbered, these hunters could turn sharply, leap across stones and vanish before predators could catch them. Every sprint refined the design of their bodies, shaping muscles, tendons, and reflexes into something sharper with each generation. Their hunger for small prey made them restless explorers. To chase insects meant moving constantly, scanning new lands, testing new terrains. This restlessness carried them into places where other reptiles could not thrive. In chasing tiny meals, they unknowingly chased the horizon of evolution. What began as the pursuit of insects would one day prepare their lineage to chase down far larger prey, rewriting the balance of Earth's ecosystems. Herbivores rising to feed on new plants. Not all early dinosaurs were hunters. Some chose a gentler path, turning to plants for survival. With flat teeth and longer necks, they grazed among the ferns and towering cycads, shaping a different kind of power. They did not need claws or speed so high. Their strength lay in endurance and in numbers. Plant eaters created a rhythm in the land. They wandered in groups, stripping leaves and leaving behind clearings where new growth would sprout. In their feeding, they sculpted the very forests they lived in. Herbivores are often underestimated, yet without them, the balance of life crumbles. Their bodies adapted to this slow work. Strong jaws, expanded bellies, and sturdy legs allowed them to digest tough plants that others ignored. They became living engines of energy transfer, converting sunlight locked in leaves into life for predators above them. Imagine standing among them. Quiet giants in the making, their heads bobbing as they tugged at fronds, their footsteps soft yet steady. They did not roar or strike, they simply endured. And endurance, across millions of years, is its own form of power. These early plant eaters mark the beginning of a cycle, the prey that would feed predators, the herds that would define landscapes, the foundation of ecosystems to come, fierce competition shaping survival. The Triassic world was not kind, resources were scarce, climates unpredictable, and predators always lurking. Every creature, reptile, amphibian, or early dinosaur, competed fiercely for food, shelter, and space. It was a world that rewarded not the strongest but the most adaptable. Competition pushed life to extremes. Some species grew armor to protect themselves, others grew faster, sharper, more cunning. Every adaptation came as a response to pressure, like notes in a conversation between predator and prey. Without this tension, the brilliance of dinosaurs might never have emerged. Imagine herds of herbivores grazing while lean predators circled at a distance. Each side watched the other, shaping its next move, its next evolution. Over time, legs grew longer, senses keener, strategies more sophisticated. The battlefield of survival was a teacher, and every creature its student. For early dinosaurs, this pressure was an advantage. Their light bones, upright stance, and quick reflexes gave them an edge. They may have been small, but in a world of constant tests, even small edges meant survival where others failed. And so, under the weight of fierce competition, dinosaurs were being honed into something sharper, something ready for the challenges of a restless Earth. The supercontinent Pangaea stretching endlessly. All of this played out on a stage like no other. Pangaea, the supercontinent. Imagine one vast landmass stretching almost from pole to pole, its interior dry and desert-like, its edges fringed with forests and shallow seas. There were no familiar borders then, only endless horizon. Pangaea's scale meant climates were extreme. The center baked in heat, while the coasts enjoyed rain and fertile lands. This contrast forced life to specialize. Creatures of the desert grew hardy and frugal, while those by the shores thrived in lush abundance. It was a patchwork of experiments spread across one canvas. The connected land also meant freedom of movement. Dinosaurs and other reptiles could wander far without barriers of ocean. Species spread, mingled, and competed across vast distances, creating a mixing pot of evolution unmatched in Earth's history. But Pangaea was also restless. Beneath its surface, tectonic forces tugged and strained. Earthquakes shook its spine, and volcanoes lined its cracks. Over millions of years, this great land would break apart, scattering creatures across drifting continents. For now, though, it was one single world, an endless stage where dinosaurs were learning to rise, their footsteps carried across the same soil from one edge of Earth to another. Climate swings, creating deserts and forests. Earth's climate in the age of early dinosaurs was far from steady. Vast stretches of land turned to dry desert, where red sands shimmered under scorching suns. Yet in other regions, rains returned with force, filling lowlands and allowing lush forests to spread again. It was a world in constant shift, a planet changing its moods every few million years. These swings were not minor. They shaped survival itself. A herd thriving in a fertile forest could suddenly face drought as rivers dried. Creatures who adapted quickly found new ways to endure, while those tied to one climate often faded away. Deserts created creatures of resilience. Forests gave rise to abundance. Together they formed a cycle of challenge and opportunity. Dinosaurs, with their adaptable frames and varied diets, found ways to live in both worlds, adjusting their bodies and behaviors across generations. Imagine walking from dry, cracked ground into a green valley, hearing the silence of the desert give way to the chorus of insects and leaves. Dinosaurs lived in these contrasts, and it sharpened their ability to survive across continents. These constant climate swings were like a forge, tempering the first dinosaurs into beings ready for greater challenges. Dinosaurs spreading across every corner. Once their bodies had learned the rhythm of survival, dinosaurs began to spread. From deserts to coastlines, from forests to plains, they expanded across the great reaches of Pangaea. Their tracks are found in places that today are oceans apart, but back then were pieces of one single land. Their spread was not a conquest in the way we imagine, but a patient drifting. Herds followed food, predators followed herds, step by step, generation after generation. They covered landscapes that seemed endless, leaving behind footprints pressed deep into soft soil that hardened into stone. The remarkable thing is how flexible they were. Some became fleet-footed hunters chasing lizards, others slow grazers stripping plants. Each environment shaped them differently, yet they all carried the same foundation. This flexibility made them resilient, allowing their kind to multiply and diversify. Their expansion was not without risk. Moving into new lands meant facing new climates, new dangers, new rivals. Yet it was in this constant testing that dinosaurs grew stronger. Each frontier they entered added a new note to their evolutionary song, and so quietly but surely, dinosaurs began to weave themselves into the very fabric of Earth's ecosystems, stretching across every corner of their world. The age of giants slowly beginning. Out of these humble beginnings, something extraordinary started to happen. Dinosaurs were no longer just small hunters and grazers. Some began to grow and grow, reaching sizes no creature on land had dared before. Their bones lengthened, their necks stretched, their weight pressed heavily into the soil. The age of giants was beginning. This growth was not random. Larger bodies offered safety from predators, more efficient digestion of tough plants, and the ability to roam vast distances in search of food. With each generation, natural selection nudged certain species towards size that defied imagination. Picture a herd of these early giants walking through a valley, their steps shaking the earth, their shadows falling across forests. Smaller creatures scurried between their feet, safe in the company of giants. These immense bodies changed not only themselves, but the entire balance of life around them. Their rise also meant predators had to respond. To feed on giants, hunters had to grow larger, faster, or smarter. Evolution is a conversation, and the growth of one group always echoes in the growth of another. The Earth was entering a new phase where size itself became a strategy, and the landscape would soon be ruled by creatures whose bones we still struggle to comprehend. Sauropods stretching necks toward the treetops. Among the earliest giants, sauropods became the most awe-inspiring. Their bodies were massive, their tails long and whip-like, and their necks stretched high into the canopy of forests. They fed on leaves no other creature could reach, turning trees into their personal banquets. It was an adaptation that defined their success. Their sheer size made them nearly untouchable. Few predators dared attack an adult sauropod. Instead, survival meant keeping the young safe until they too reached colossal size. Herding behavior may have been their answer, groups of giants moving like living fortresses across plains. The design of their bodies was remarkable. Hollow bones reduced weight, air sacs helped them breathe efficiently, and long necks allowed them to graze across wide areas without moving far. Every detail was perfected by time, turning them into living marvels of engineering. Imagine standing beneath one, its head swaying far above like a moving tree trunk, its footsteps like soft thunder. These creatures turned the earth itself into a stage of wonder, reminding us how far evolution can stretch possibility. The sauropods were proof that dinosaurs had entered a golden age of innovation, where the limits of size and form were being tested to their extremes. Predators growing larger to keep pace, but giants never rise without challenges. As herbivores like sauropods stretched toward the treetops, predators began to grow in response. No longer were light-boned insect chasers enough. New hunters emerged, their jaws strong enough to crush bone, their bodies built for speed and ambush. It was an arms race carved in flesh and stone. These predators walked on powerful hind legs, balancing with long tails. Their teeth were serrated like knives, able to tear through the flesh of even the largest prey. Their senses sharpened, eyes keen, noses alert, ears tuned to the faintest sound. Hunting giants required strategy. Some may have hunted in groups, circling the vulnerable, focusing on the young or the weak. Others relied on sudden bursts of speed, attacking with surprise before slipping away. Each predator tested new tactics in the theater of survival. The sight must have been terrifying. Massive hunters stalking across open ground, shadows stretching over plains as herds moved nervously. Every step of predator and prey shaped the other, pushing both toward greater extremes. And so the rise of giants was matched by the rise of killers. The balance of Earth's ecosystems tightened, each side sharpening the other in the endless game of survival. The Jurassic explosion of diversity. The Jurassic period opened like a curtain lifting on a grand stage. Life seemed to burst into forms more varied than ever before. Forests grew thicker, rivers spread wider, and climates softened compared to the harsher Triassic. This gentler Earth allowed creatures to experiment, and dinosaurs took full advantage. Herbivores diversified into countless shapes: long-necked sauropods, armored stegosaurs, swift, two-legged grazers. Predators answered with their own variations: raptors with sharp claws, massive hunters with bone-crushing jaws, and nimble sprinters that darted through undergrowth. The land itself became alive with movement. The Jurassic was also a time of balance. Ecosystems grew complex with layers of creatures depending on one another. Small insect eaters thrived alongside giants. Every niche, every role was filled. The more life diversified, the stronger the web of survival became. It must have been breathtaking: valleys filled with herds, skies dotted with flying reptiles, forests echoing with calls we can only imagine. The planet was no longer a place of scattered survivors. It was a symphony of life reaching its first great crescendo. This explosion of diversity marked the true beginning of the dinosaurs' golden reign, a reign that would last for over 100 million years. Feathered creatures gliding between branches. Among the surprises of the Jurassic were small dinosaurs carrying something new: feathers. At first, they were not for flight but for warmth or display, soft coverings that shimmered under sunlight. Over time, these feathers gave rise to gliders, creatures leaping from branch to branch with grace never before seen. Imagine standing in a fern forest and from the corner of your eye, a feathered form sails silently between trees. These were not yet birds, but their bodies were experimenting with air. Gravity, once an unbreakable chain, was slowly being challenged. Feathers may have begun as insulation, keeping small bodies warm in cooler nights. But evolution is clever. What starts with one purpose often transforms into another. Some species used feathers to signal, flashing colors in courtship. Others stretched them longer, catching currents of air. These gliders showed the direction of the future. They were small, light, alert, and their freedom in the trees gave them advantages predators on the ground could not match. In their fragile wings lay the seeds of an entirely new dynasty. The story of dinosaurs was no longer only written on land. It had begun to take to the air. The first hints of birds hidden in stone. Fossils like Archaeopteryx reveal the earliest whispers of true birds. Found in limestone, its delicate feathers pressed into stone, it shows us a creature balanced between two worlds, dinosaur and bird. With claws on its wings, teeth in its beak, and feathers on its arms, it carried both past and future in one body. This discovery changed how we understand dinosaurs. They were not just scaly giants, but innovators, branching into forms that would survive long after their cousins vanished. To see feathers in stone is to see proof that evolution does not erase but transforms. Early bird-like dinosaurs may have fluttered between trees, not soaring like eagles, but flapping awkwardly, practicing the art of flight. These attempts, however imperfect, meant freedom from many predators and access to new sources of food high in the canopy. Every fossil of these creatures feels like a whisper across time. The outline of feathers, the hint of hollow bones, all tell us that what we call birds are simply living dinosaurs, survivors of an age that seemed otherwise lost. The first hints of birds remind us that extinction is never the only ending. Sometimes it is transformation, a dance of predator and prey shaping evolution. No creature evolves in isolation. The relationship between predator and prey is a dance, each shaping the other with every move. As herbivores grew larger and more armored, predators sharpened their teeth and claws. As hunters grew smarter, prey developed herding strategies and defensive weapons. This balance was constant, like a conversation across generations. A predator that failed to adapt starved. A herbivore that failed to adapt perished. But those who adjusted, those who found new tricks, thrived and passed their lessons to the future. Picture a herd of stegosaurs, their tails tipped with deadly spikes, standing against a pack of raptors. Neither side had certainty. The outcome of such clashes was unpredictable, but over time, these encounters etched strength into the DNA of both. The result was a world of brilliance. Dinosaurs were not static creatures locked in design. They were dynamic, always shifting, always in dialogue with the challenges around them. The very drama of survival wrote their diversity. In this endless dance, evolution found its rhythm, and dinosaurs became masters of both strength and strategy. Armored giants defending against tooth and claw. Among the most striking of Jurassic creatures were those who carried armor upon their backs. Plates, spikes, and thick hides turned their bodies into fortresses. Stegosaurs are the most famous, their great plates rising like sails, their tails ending in sharp thagomisers ready to strike. They were symbols of defense perfected. Armor was costly. It required energy to grow, and it slowed movement. Yet for herbivores, it was worth the trade. Armor meant survival against predators that otherwise would have torn them apart. It was the shield that allowed them to graze with confidence. These defenses were not only physical, but psychological. A predator eyeing a spiked tail might think twice. Evolution, after all, is as much about deterring attacks as winning them. The sight of a stegosaur, slow but bristling with weapons, was a warning written in bone. Armored giants changed predator behavior. They forced hunters to adapt, to choose smaller or weaker prey. They bent the rules of the ecosystem simply by existing, their very presence shaping the flow of survival. The rise of these armored creatures shows us that power does not always roar or chase. Sometimes it stands still, quietly daring the world to try its strength. The oceans teeming with reptilian rulers. While dinosaurs reigned on land, the oceans told their own tale. Vast seas were ruled not by fish alone, but by marine reptiles. Ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins, plesiosaurs with long necks, and mosasaurs with jaws like underwater crocodiles. They were not dinosaurs, but they thrived alongside them, carving a kingdom beneath the waves. Imagine the surface calm, but below, shadows moved with power and grace. Ichthyosaurs darted after schools of fish, while giant plesiosaurs glided silently, their necks weaving through water like serpents. It was a ballet of hunters and prey, as dramatic as anything on land. The seas were dangerous places. Even the largest creatures had to stay alert. Sharks prowled, smaller reptiles hid in reefs, and great predators patrolled open waters. Every layer of the ocean was alive with contests of speed, stealth, and strength. These marine rulers remind us that life's story never belongs to one realm alone. As dinosaurs grew on land, oceans answered with giants of their own, showing that evolution writes in parallel chapters across every corner of Earth. To walk along a Jurassic shore was to feel the presence of two kingdoms, one above, one below, each filled with rulers in their own right. Flying reptiles painting the skies wide. Above the oceans and plains, the skies too were claimed. Pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, stretched wings of leathery skin and soared with ease over cliffs and coastlines. They were the first true masters of the air, long before birds perfected their flight. From small insect catchers to giants with wingspans like airplanes, they filled the skies with shadows. Their wings were marvels of design, thin membranes stretched over elongated fingers, light but strong. With hollow bones and sharp eyesight, they could dive for fish, hunt small creatures, or simply glide for hours on warm currents of air. The sight of them must have been otherworldly. Imagine herds of dinosaurs grazing below while above. Vast flocks of pterosaurs wheeled and screamed, their silhouettes blotting the sun. The land, sea, and sky were all alive at once, each realm brimming with predators and prey. Pterosaurs also diversified wildly. Some had crests like sails on their heads used for display or balance. Others grew sharp teeth for fishing. Each form carried a new experiment, another way to carve a life in the air. Evolution spared no detail. The age of dinosaurs was not just about ground-shaking footsteps. It was also about wings that painted the skies with restless motion. Plant life transforming with new seeds. While animals dazzled with size and speed, plants were quietly staging a revolution. Until now, Earth had been dominated by ferns, cycads, and conifers. But in the late Jurassic and Cretaceous, flowering plants began to emerge. Small at first, fragile and delicate, they carried within them a silent power, the seed wrapped in fruit. Seeds changed everything. They could travel further, survive longer, and feed animals more richly. Fruit tempted creatures to eat, carrying seeds across distances in their stomachs. Suddenly plants could spread not just with wind or water, but with the help of animals themselves. Forests shifted, meadows of flowering plants appeared, painting the land with colors never seen before. Pollinators, like insects, flourished, building new relationships with these blossoms. The entire web of life became more interconnected, more complex, more vibrant. Dinosaurs, too, were shaped by this change. Herbivores adjusted their diets, predators followed, and entire ecosystems bent around the spread of flowers and fruit. What began as a quiet bloom turned into a global transformation. The rise of flowering plants shows us that sometimes the most profound revolutions arrive not with thunder, but with petals. Dinosaurs adapting with every shift. Through each of these changes, climate swings, drifting continents, blooming flowers, dinosaurs adapted. They did not cling to one form or one strategy. Instead, they branched like trees, filling every niche from the smallest insect chaser to the tallest leaf-browsing giant. This flexibility was the secret to their long reign. Some grew horns and frills, others armor and spikes. Some learned speed, others strength. Even within the same groups, diversity blossomed, each species shaped by its corner of the earth. The story of dinosaurs is not one of repetition, but of endless variation. Adaptation meant survival across millions of years, far longer than humans have even existed. It also meant resilience in the face of disasters, from volcanic winters to shifting seas. Dinosaurs bent with the storms, finding ways to endure where others vanished. Imagine watching the landscape shift, yet still seeing dinosaurs present. Different faces, different shapes, but always there. They became the thread weaving through Earth's tapestry, adapting as the world demanded. Their story is a lesson. Survival is not about perfection, but about change. And dinosaurs were masters of change for over 160 million years. The golden age of colossal sauropods. And at the peak of their adaptability came their giants, the colossal sauropods. These creatures embodied the majesty of the dinosaur age. With necks stretching like living towers, bodies the weight of dozens of elephants, and tails sweeping like whips, they were the largest land animals to ever walk the earth. Sauropods such as Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus roamed in herds, shaking the ground as they passed. Their size was their strength, their presence unmatched. No predator could challenge a full-grown adult. They were living monuments of evolution's ambition, pushing biology to its farthest limits. Their diets were vast, stripping entire trees of leaves. Yet their bodies were built for efficiency, with lungs that processed air in ways similar to modern birds, and skeletons designed with hollow spaces to lighten the load. They were marvels of engineering written in bone and muscle. The sight of them must have been overwhelming. Imagine standing in their shadow, craning your neck until it ached, listening to the deep rumble of their movements. They were not just animal, they were Earth's moving architecture. This golden age of sauropods represents the high note of the Jurassic Symphony, a time when the land was ruled not by predators, but by peaceful giants. Brachiosaurus towering above rivers. Among the sauropods, Brachiosaurus stood as a symbol of majesty. With its front legs longer than its back, it tilted forward like a living crane, lifting its neck into the canopy of forests. Imagine rivers lined with these giants, their heads swaying above treetops while their bodies blocked out the sun below. Their size made them walking ecosystems. Birds perched on their backs, insects buzzed around them, and smaller dinosaurs moved in their shadows for protection. Where a Brachiosaurus stood, the ground itself seemed smaller, as if Earth had grown a mountain that could walk. Their feeding shaped entire landscapes. Forests were trimmed high where they grazed, leaving behind open spaces below for smaller creatures. The growth patterns of plants themselves bent to the rhythm of these giants, proving that even trees learned to live with dinosaurs. Fossils show us their bones, hollowed for lightness yet strong as steel. Their lungs were vast, their hearts powerful enough to pump blood up those impossible necks. Evolution had engineered them into living miracles, monuments of balance between weight and strength. Brachiosaurus reminds us that life sometimes chooses awe as its strategy, to survive by being too vast, too towering, too breathtaking to challenge. Stegosaurus, carrying plates of mystery. While sauropods ruled with size, Stegosaurus carried its own strange armor, great bony plates rising along its back and tail spikes sharp enough to pierce predators. This creature was a puzzle, both fearsome and gentle, a walking fortress with secrets etched in bone. Its plates have long puzzled scientists. Were they for defense, to make it look larger, or for display, catching the eyes of rivals and mates? Some suggest they even helped regulate heat, turning the plates into solar panels of living tissue. Whatever their purpose, they made Stegosaurus unforgettable. Despite its fearsome appearance, Stegosaurus had a small brain compared to its body, often described as no larger than a walnut. Yet this did not make it weak. Survival is not about intellect alone, but about strategy, and Stegosaurus had armor enough to endure. Picture a herd of them grazing low plants, their tails swinging slowly until a predator dared to come close. Then, with explosive force, the spikes lashed out, a deadly message that even giants had guardians at their sides. Stegosaurus teaches us that survival sometimes comes not from strength of mind or speed of foot, but from simply being too dangerous to touch. The cunning rise of pack hunters. Not all predators grew into solitary giants. Some found greater success in numbers. Early raptors, lean and sharp-clawed, began hunting in coordinated packs. Their strength was not in size but in cooperation, in the shared intelligence of group survival. Imagine a lone herbivore grazing. One raptor distracts it from the front, while others circle silently through the undergrowth. When the moment comes, they strike together, overwhelming prey too large for any single hunter. It was strategy, nature's first taste of organized teamwork among dinosaurs. Their bodies reflected this shift. They were smaller than tyrants, but their claws were curved like blades, their legs built for speed, their senses finely tuned. Quick bursts of communication may have passed between them. Gestures, calls, movements that kept the pack aligned. Pack hunting changed the balance of fear. Even armored dinosaurs could fall if they strayed too far from their herd. Predators no longer needed sheer strength. They needed unity, and unity was a weapon sharper than any tooth. The rise of pack hunters foreshadows what we later see in wolves, lions, and humans. Survival often favors the many who act as one raptor-like species testing strategy. Within the ranks of these pack hunters, raptors became the most fascinating. Sleek, bird-like, and intelligent, they were more than killers. They were thinkers, testing strategies, adapting mid-hunt, learning from failure. In their eyes, you can almost see the spark of problem-solving. Fossils reveal claws like sickles on their hind feet, weapons designed for precision. They leapt, slashed, and retreated, striking again until their prey fell. But more impressive than their claws was their adaptability. Raptors tried new tactics, adjusted to new challenges, and thrived where others faltered. Imagine them stalking through fern forests, moving with quiet intent, their heads tilting, eyes glinting. They were not the largest, but they knew how to use their environment. Every tree, every shadow became part of their plan. Their intelligence has sparked endless fascination. Some suggest they communicated in ways beyond simple noise, with body language, coordination, perhaps even early signs of social hierarchy. They remind us that power is not always brute. Sometimes it is cunning. Raptors were not just predators. They were strategists, showing that in evolution, cleverness can be just as dangerous as teeth. The Cretaceous bloom of flowering plants. As the Cretaceous dawned, the earth blossomed in ways it never had before. Flowering plants spread rapidly, filling valleys and plains with colors and scents unseen in earlier ages. With them came fruits and seeds, reshaping not just the land, but the diets of countless creatures. For herbivores, this meant abundance. No longer were they limited to tough ferns or towering conifers. Now they had meadows, fruits, and diverse vegetation. Their teeth evolved to grind, their stomachs to digest new foods, and their lives to follow the cycles of blooming fields. Predators, too, felt the change. As herbivores adapted to richer diets, they multiplied in new ways. More prey meant more hunters. Entire ecosystems became more layered, more dynamic, each species tied more closely to the flowering rhythm of the land. Pollinators flourished, insects found new roles in spreading pollen, and with them came tighter bonds between plant and animal. It was an age where cooperation, as much as competition, defined survival. Flowers did not roar, yet they reshaped the destiny of dinosaurs. The Cretaceous bloom was a quiet revolution, a reminder that even the mightiest giants are ultimately fed by the softness of petals. New diets, opening new possibilities. The spread of flowering plants created new diets, and with them came new opportunities. Herbivores now fed not only on towering trees, but on low shrubs, fruits, and seeds. This shift changed their bodies. Jaws widened, teeth flattened, and stomachs grew more specialized for complex digestion. With richer diets, herbivores could live in greater numbers. Meadows of flowering plants supported larger herds, and larger herds meant predators had to adapt in turn. Entire ecosystems reshaped themselves around this new abundance of food. Energy flowed more freely, and the variety of life expanded like never before. This change also encouraged migration. Herds followed the cycles of blooming plants, moving with the seasons. In turn, predators shadowed them across great distances, ensuring that no corner of the land was untouched by the drama of survival. Imagine wide plains carpeted with wildflowers, herds of dinosaurs grazing quietly, while raptors circled at the edges. The air buzzed with insects, the ground trembled with footsteps, and life felt woven together in one great tapestry of motion. The diets of dinosaurs remind us that survival is not only about teeth and claws. Sometimes it begins with the silent bloom of a flower. Horned dinosaurs building strange defenses, Out of these flowering landscapes rose some of the most striking herbivores ever to walk the earth, the ceratopsians, or horned dinosaurs. With great frills on their skulls and horns jutting from their brows, they looked like armored knights of the prehistoric world. Their horns were not merely for battle. Some were for defense, yes, but others, likely, played roles in display, courtship, and communication. A herd of horned dinosaurs must have been a sight. Heads lifted, frills flashing colors, horns clashing in ritualistic duels beneath the sun. Predators thought twice before challenging them. A single horned dinosaur could defend itself with deadly force, and in groups they were nearly impenetrable. Yet their defenses also made them social creatures, working together in herds, protecting their young and moving like armies across plains. Their skulls became canvases for evolution's creativity. Some carried elaborate frills with patterns of holes, others enormous horns that curved forward or upward. Each species was a new design, a new attempt to balance beauty, power, and survival. The horned dinosaurs remind us that defense can be art, and that even in the harshest battles of survival, life finds room for beauty. The dominance of the mighty tyrants. While horned dinosaurs armed themselves with frills and spikes, predators rose to meet them, none more fearsome than the mighty tyrants of the Cretaceous. These were the ancestors of the legendary Tyrannosaurus, massive hunters whose very presence defined dominance. Their jaws were unmatched, packed with teeth that could crush bone. Their senses were razor-sharp. Eyes forward for depth perception, noses tuned to scent prey from miles away. They did not need speed alone. They carried power that ended most battles with a single bite. The rise of these tyrants reshaped fear. Entire herds adjusted their movements, keeping young close and never straying too far. Smaller predators avoided direct conflict, taking to scavenging or night hunting to survive in the shadow of giants. Imagine the silence of a plain broken by the distant approach of one of these beasts. Even before it arrived, the ground seemed to carry its warning. It was not just an animal, it was a force of nature carved for dominance. The tyrants of the Cretaceous became symbols of evolution's raw ambition, embodying what it means to rule with undeniable power. Tyrannosaurus emerging as apex predator. By the late Cretaceous, Tyrannosaurus rex stood at the top. Towering over the land, it embodied everything evolution had sharpened across millions of years. Its skull alone was larger than a human body, its bite force the greatest of any land animal known. Yet T-Rex was more than brute strength. Its keen senses made it a calculating predator. It could track prey, sense movement, and strike with precision. Its small arms, often ridiculed today, were not weakness but remnants of a lineage where every ounce of power was poured into jaws and legs. Herds of horned and duck-billed dinosaurs lived under its shadow, always aware of its presence. Some scientists believe it hunted, others that it scavenged. Likely it did both, claiming whatever opportunity arose. When you are that powerful, choice itself becomes your weapon. The image of T-Rex remains etched in our imagination because it feels like the culmination of the dinosaur story, the ultimate predator, perfected for its time. Its reign was short compared to the history of dinosaurs, yet its legacy towers above them all. Tyrannosaurus reminds us that evolution sometimes writes climaxes, moments where power feels absolute, just before the story shifts forever. Raptors becoming smarter and swifter. Even as the giants dominated, smaller predators like raptors carved their own legacy. They did not grow into titans but into thinkers. Swift, cunning, and coordinated. In packs, they could challenge prey far larger than themselves, using intelligence as their edge. Their bodies were built for agility. Feathers lined their limbs, helping with balance and perhaps display. Their claws were sharp sickles, designed for precision. But it was their brains, relatively larger than most dinosaurs, that set them apart. Raptors were not just hunters. They were problem solvers. Imagine them weaving through forests, eyes alert, claws ready, working together to corner their prey. Their speed was breathtaking, but it was their cooperation that truly gave them power. They hunted like minds linked together, a shared instinct written across the pack. Fossils show us they lived in groups, nests, clustered together, evidence of social behavior beyond survival. They were not loners but communities, building strength in unity, a survival strategy that echoes across time to wolves, lions, and even humans. The rise of raptors reminds us that evolution values intelligence as much as muscle. In their eyes, we glimpse the beginning of something that feels uncannily familiar: birds taking their place among trees. From the feathered experiments of the Jurassic came a new chapter: true birds. Their wings grew stronger, their feathers more specialized, and their bodies lighter than any dinosaur before them. They no longer only glided, they flew, claiming the skies with freedom that was irreversible. Birds carved out places dinosaurs had never fully touched. High in the canopy, they nested. Across rivers and cliffs they soared. They fed on seeds, insects, and even small reptiles. Their agility in 3 dimensions made them untouchable by many predators tied to the ground. This flight gave them resilience. When forests shifted, when predators grew more powerful, birds could always rise above, escaping into the air. They became messengers of adaptability, proving that survival often belongs to those who can simply lift themselves away from danger. Fossils reveal their steady growth, from creatures with claws on their wings to more refined forms, streamlined and elegant. Each step shows the blending of dinosaur and bird, until the line between them almost vanishes. Birds remind us that the story of dinosaurs is not only about endings, it is also about transformations that continue to live among us, perched in trees and singing in the dawn. Colors and feathers brightening the land. As feathers spread beyond flight, dinosaurs began to wear colors. Some sprouted bright displays on their heads or tails, not for survival alone, but for communication, attraction, and perhaps even beauty. The land once filled with scales and armor grew more vibrant with each generation. Feathers became signals. A raptor with a plume might declare dominance. A small herbivore with patterned feathers might hide better among ferns. Evolution was painting with color, adding layers to survival beyond strength and speed. Suddenly sight itself became a battleground. The variety was astonishing. Fossil evidence hints at reds, blacks, and shimmering iridescence, patterns that caught the light like jewels. Dinosaurs were no longer only giants, they were artists of their own survival, their bodies canvases of natural design. This rise of feathers changed how dinosaurs interacted. Courtship dances, warning displays, social signals, all were made more powerful by the language of color. Life was no longer only about fighting and feeding, it was about expression. The brightening of the land shows us that evolution is not just about function. Sometimes it chooses beauty, reminding us that survival and wonder can walk hand in hand, a world at its peak of life's variety. By the late Cretaceous, dinosaurs reached their greatest variety. Sauropods still wandered as giants, horned dinosaurs roamed in herds, duck-billed species sang with resonating crests, and tyrants ruled with bone-crushing jaws. The Earth seemed full, alive at every level, a masterpiece of diversity. Every corner of the land held a role. Small insect eaters darted between the legs of herds. Armored giants stood like sentinels. Predators lurked in forests while birds filled the skies. The balance of ecosystems had never been richer, each creature part of a complex web of survival. The land itself was generous. Flowering plants spread widely, forests thrived, and rivers carved fertile valleys. Life seemed to have found its golden harmony, a peak where evolution's creativity felt endless and triumphant. Imagine standing in such a world, the sound of horns calling across plains, the flutter of birds in the trees, the distant tremble of sauropods moving slowly in herds. It was not chaos, but a vibrant symphony of life, every note in its place. This peak reminds us that sometimes nature gathers all its brilliance before a sudden change. Balance often hides the storm waiting at the edge of time, but subtle changes brewing in the skies. Even in this golden age, the earth whispered of change. Subtle shifts in climate began to trouble ecosystems. Some regions grew drier, others colder. Sea levels rose and fell, reshaping coastlines. To the dinosaurs living then, it may have seemed ordinary, but in hindsight, these were the first tremors of decline. Volcanoes added haze to the air, cooling skies and altering rainfall. Forests shifted, breaking apart old habitats. Some species began to vanish quietly, leaving gaps in the web of survival. The stage was still filled with giants, but shadows crept in at the edges. Predators had to adjust to smaller prey. Herbivores shifted diets, searching for new plants as familiar ones disappeared. These were not sudden extinctions, but slow frictions, small difficulties that made life more fragile, more vulnerable to whatever came next. It is easy to imagine this world as calm, but beneath the surface balance was straining. The Earth was changing faster than some species could adapt, and evolution is never kind to those who linger behind. The skies remind us that endings rarely arrive unannounced. They often begin as whispers, carried quietly, until one day the silence breaks into thunder. Sea levels rising and falling unpredictably. One of the clearest whispers of change came through the seas. Oceans swelled higher, then receded, swallowing coastlines and revealing new lands. Entire habitats appeared and vanished within spans of time that challenged even the adaptability of dinosaurs. These shifts disrupted the flow of survival. Creatures that relied on coastal plains found their homes underwater, forests drowned, swamps dried, and migration routes twisted endlessly. For dinosaurs, it was like chasing a moving target. The land itself could no longer be trusted. Rising seas also altered climate. Warmer oceans released more moisture into the air, bringing storms that battered the land. Lower seas cooled the planet, shrinking habitats into harsh, dry expanses. Life had to bend with every rise and fall. Imagine a herd reaching its traditional grazing ground only to find it submerged beneath waves. Predators waiting there found no prey, forced to wander further. These were the quiet disruptions that slowly unraveled the Golden Age. Sea levels remind us that the Earth itself is alive, restless, and untamed. And when the seas move, even giants must bow to their tides, volcanoes filling the air with haze. The Earth beneath the dinosaurs was restless. Great volcanic fields erupted, pouring rivers of lava across landscapes and filling the air with ash. For years at a time, the skies dimmed, the sun's warmth muted by a haze of particles drifting across continents. For herbivores, this was devastating. Plants withered under the shadowed skies, growing weak and sparse. Predators soon felt the same hunger, their prey disappearing into the quiet of starvation. Life bent under the weight of a planet clouded by its own breath. Volcanoes shaped more than hunger. They altered climates, cooling lands with their ash, yet warming them again with their gases. The cycle of eruption and silence became a rhythm that tested survival like never before. Only those who could endure these swings thrived. Imagine standing in a valley, the horizon lit red by distant eruptions, ash falling like dark snow across the trees. To dinosaurs, this was no extraordinary event. It was simply another test in a world that never stopped shifting. Volcanoes remind us that the Earth itself is alive, and its moods can change the course of history with a single breath of fire. Climate stress testing every species. As volcanic haze mingled with shifting seas, climates grew more unstable. Some regions suffered droughts, others faced floods. Temperatures swung wildly, pushing ecosystems into imbalance. The harmony of the late Cretaceous began to crack under the weight of instability. Herbivores struggled to adapt, flowers bloomed out of season, fruits appeared and vanished unpredictably, and grazing grounds shifted. Predators followed these changes, but each new adaptation cost energy, and not all species could keep up. Even the mightiest giants faced struggle. A sauropod needed endless supplies of leaves, yet forests shrank in uncertain climates. Horned dinosaurs needed strong herds, yet migration paths no longer led to the same fertile valleys. Survival became a gamble played against the Earth itself. This stress did not wipe out dinosaurs all at once, but it weakened their resilience. Populations dwindled, species disappeared quietly, and the balance that once seemed eternal grew fragile. The golden age was thinning. Climate stress reminds us that even the strongest fall when the world beneath them shifts too quickly to grasp. Dinosaurs adapting, yet struggling quietly. Through all of this, dinosaurs did what they always had. They adapted. New species appeared with stronger jaws, lighter frames, sharper senses. Some herds changed diets, others migrated further, and predators learned to scavenge as much as they hunted. Yet adaptation has limits. When change comes faster than life can respond, even the most resilient falter. Fossils tell of dwindling variety in the late Cretaceous, as once thriving groups shrank to fewer species. The land still seemed full of life, but the edges of the tapestry were unraveling. Imagine a plain filled with dinosaurs grazing as always, yet fewer than before, their young more vulnerable, their ranges smaller. To the eye it was still abundance, to time it was decline. Birds fared better, their flight carrying them beyond failing habitats. Small mammals too found opportunity, darting into niches left empty. Evolution never leaves space unused. Where one fades, another waits to rise. Dinosaurs carried on with quiet dignity, but their world was preparing for a test unlike any they had faced before. The sudden arrival of something cosmic. Then came the moment no adaptation could withstand. A rock from space, vast and unyielding, entered Earth's atmosphere. It burned bright in the sky, brighter than the sun, a streak of fire that carried with it the end of an age. The impact struck with unimaginable force, carving a crater over 100 miles wide. Shockwaves raced outward, flattening forests, boiling seas, and shaking the ground across continents. In that single instant, the world was changed forever. The heat was unbearable, igniting wildfires that raged across landscapes. Ash and dust were thrown high into the atmosphere, blocking the sun and plunging the earth into darkness. It was a silence more profound than any before, a silence born of catastrophe. Dinosaurs that had endured droughts, volcanoes, and predators now faced something beyond all measure. There was no defense against a world turned suddenly cold, against skies that refused to let light through. The cosmic visitor was not cruel, only indifferent. Yet in its indifference, it rewrote the destiny of life on Earth. A fiery rock entering Earth's atmosphere. The moment itself was unlike anything the planet had ever known. From the heavens, a fiery rock roared down, tearing the sky as it fell. Dinosaurs may have looked up, seeing only light and heat, not knowing it was the herald of their twilight. The air split with sound as it struck, louder than any thunder, more final than any storm. Oceans rose, forests burned, and the earth trembled. In that single day, millions of years of dominance met their test in fire and stone. The aftermath was worse than the impact. Skies filled with smoke, blocking warmth. Days turned to nights that stretched for months, perhaps years. Plants starved, prey vanished, predators faltered. The chain of survival snapped link by link. Imagine standing in that darkness, the air cold, the land silent. For creatures that once shook the ground with every step, it was the quiet that defeated them. Giants fell not with roars but with silence, settling over the earth. The fiery rock was the exclamation point at the end of the dinosaurs' reign, closing one chapter so another could begin.